starting. Welcome everybody to this webinar on the theme, how can the new European Bauhaus foster architecture for urban inclusion? That's arranged by Housing Solutions Platform, which is a joint initiative by FEANZA, Housing Europe and Fondation Abbé Pierre. My name is Juha Kaakinen and I was formerly known as the CAO of my foundation, currently still for a month as a senior advisor in the foundation and then hopefully retiring. So this is a very special occasion also for me. Nice to be with you here, and I'm very much looking forward for us to have a very interesting and fruitful discussion during the next 2.5 hours. But before we start, just one housekeeping issue. I hope you keep your mics muted if you are not speaking to avoid any disturbance for the presentations. Before the actual presentations, we have two small introductions. And the first one is from the FEANZA Deputy Director Ruth Owen. Ruth, the floor, or actually the screen is yours, Ruth.
Thank you very much for the screen, Juha. I think Juha said much of what I wanted to say. Those of you who are wide awake this morning will notice that I'm in fact not Freek Spinnewijn, but Ruth Owen. Freek, the director of FEANZA, is unwell today, so I'm stepping in for him. FEANZA is indeed very proud to be the initiator of the Housing Solutions Platform, which it aims to identify, debate and support the scale up of bold and innovative solutions to address unmet housing needs in Europe. We work on that with the Fondation Abbé Pierre and Housing Europe. And these debates are one of the kind of signature activities, and I'd say big successes of the Housing Solutions Platform. Thanks, Juha, for chairing today and for introducing the discussion. I don't think FEANZA or the Housing Solutions Platform is keen to let you retire too quickly and too quietly, because I think Juha has been one of the major contributors to kind of out-of-the-box thinking and courageous thinking about housing and how to secure the right to housing for the most vulnerable people in society. So we owe him a lot, and we hope to keep him involved in this work. Today's event is in many ways a follow-up to an event that we organized back in November that was a sort of introduction to the new European Bauhaus from a housing exclusion and homelessness perspective. I think it's fair to say that in that debate, we were asking a fairly critical question about how can this like aesthetic and green movement that is trying to be created really deliver anything from an inclusion perspective, and will it reach the people who need maybe the most from the built environment? I think we came out of that discussion feeling like yes, it can and it should, and that's what we're doing here today, is trying to bring some inspiring thinkers and practitioners together to follow up on that. So I'll stop talking and hand over to Kieran Clough, who is a member of the European Parliament, who has a background in architecture and town planning, and who is the rapporteur for the energy performance in buildings directive, and has done some really important work at European level around the whole question of energy efficiency and the built environment. So I'll hand over to Kieran. Thanks very much for being with us today.
Well, thank you, and good morning to you all, and greetings from a busy Brussels, where Joe Biden's in town. So if you hear helicopters overhead, it just means that there's quite a bit of activity around the Parliament. Look, my sincere thanks to the Housing Solutions Platform for inviting me to speak at this debate. And as you pointed out, Ruth, I'm a Green MEP for Dublin, and my background is professionally, I'm an architect and an urban planner. And in fact, I was running a master's program in urban regeneration and development. So it's an area that interests me and fascinates me in terms of how we can improve our cities and towns, improve housing, and ensure that the most vulnerable in society benefit from the changes that we're making. And, you know, I am encouraged by the new European Bauhaus or the initiative because it does seek to inject design and culture into our climate goals. But the question remains, what can the new European Bauhaus do to foster urban inclusion and tackle homelessness in Europe? And I think in answering this question, I'd like to focus on two of the core new European Bauhaus principles: sustainability and inclusion. The third one is aesthetics, but I might leave that to others on the panel. Firstly, on sustainability, the new European Bauhaus says that it will connect to the European Green Deal with our living spaces and experiences. And you've all heard the phrase, the European Green Deal, but the headline of the European Green Deal is that it wants to reduce greenhouse gas emissions within the European Union by 55% between 1990 and 2030, and get us to climate neutrality by 2050. So that means, very specifically, big improvements in energy performance of the EU's buildings, including social housing. So that will tackle energy poverty. And one of the ways we will do that is through this draft law, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. This is the third time this directive has been produced, and the ambition is very high to get all buildings to essentially an A energy rating by the year 2050. And I would argue that we need to start with social housing, with public housing, and ensure that we bring those buildings up to a near zero energy performance. And I think in doing so, we can certainly help tackle energy poverty. We can reduce people's heating and cooling bills. And if we do it right, it will give people, those who live in social housing, more freedom from high fuel prices, which have hit the headlines a lot in recent days. So clearly, though, finance is a very important part of this. The encouraging news is that in talking to the European Central Bank, the European Investment Bank, and other finance providers, they want to put money into this. They're prepared to do so at very low rates of return because they know that the rate of return is predictable. And let's be honest, there's a lot of money looking for somewhere to invest in recent years, and housing traditionally is a safe bet. So hopefully that money will flow. So the priority is the renovation of the existing building stock to create warmer and safer and healthier spaces for people to live in. I think we all learned from the pandemic of the disparities in society. Some people had large homes and outdoor spaces. Some people didn't even have a balcony to go out on. So I think this will focus attention on the quality of our living spaces and clean air as well. And we know the link in poorly ventilated homes with condensation, the link to respiratory ailments with asthma and mold. So if we upgrade our homes, we will help improve the quality of the air in those homes, sometimes with mechanical heat recovery, and hopefully that will clearly improve people's health. The other thing to mention is that, and from the new European Bauhaus projects that we've seen so far, there's an encouragement of innovative solutions and natural materials. As an architect, I'm always a little bit wary of creating a new frontier and doing things incredibly differently. I think we've seen flawed experiments that did that in the 1950s 60s and 70s. So once bitten, twice shy. And I think a lot of practitioners, as you all know, look at homelessness and say, oh, let's use shipping containers. People think there's a quick fix. There isn't, because we need both quality homes and the services that go with that. And I think we should be wary of any assumption that the new European Bauhaus is a magic wand that can instantly create innovation and amazing solutions to the housing challenges that we have. But there will be a focus on the circular economy, on using natural materials, on reusing materials. And if we do that right, it won't be a headache. It will be a positive add-on that will give us healthier air, healthier materials that we use to create buildings, and it'll be better for the planet as well. Secondly, on inclusion, the new European Bauhaus will foster joined up thinking between those who design, manage, and use housing. So the kind of the historical paradigm of the architect riding into town on the white horse and producing the solution, I think, is gone. And I think the focus on collaboration, on sitting down with the end users of a building, listening to their needs and concerns, is now put center stage. So architects, engineers, planners, the end user, the client, everybody needs to be in the room. And I think the spirit of collaboration from the new European Bauhaus is a very positive one that will give us rewards. So less isolation, more involvement of all stakeholders. And I think that can be a springboard to innovation and help us achieve good results. It also means the new European Bauhaus means making better use of what we already have. In other words, less focus on demolition, more emphasis on reusing existing buildings. And certainly in my own experience, and I've spent many years as a city councillor in Dublin, and I think quite often housing managers were happier demolishing and rebuilding because it was a simple thing to manage. But the problem is that if you demolish, you lose all of not just the physical infrastructure, but the social infrastructure, the glue, the social glue, the ties that bind. And I think careful and sensitive reuse of buildings makes absolute sense. And to me is a crucial element of the new European Bauhaus approach. And of course, last year we saw the French architects Anne Lacouture and Jean-Philippe Vassal win the Pritzker Prize. And of course, the quote that we know from them is never demolish, never remove or replace, always add, transform, and reuse. And their approach pursues economic, social, and environmental performance that addresses the challenge of building smarter, greener, and for all. Of course, this isn't easy. And those of you who've dealt with housing on the ground know that the challenge of refurbishing, upgrading, retrofitting is not easy. It is complex, but it can produce a much better result because it does not completely displace or destroy existing communities. I also think the new European Bauhaus needs to be about social inclusion. It needs to be about integration in housing for people with special needs into the existing communities rather than isolation. And speaking of isolation, the joined up thinking between what we build and how we move around is really important. This link between transport and mobility and buildings. Because a lot of people, particularly those who have experienced homelessness, suffer not just from energy poverty, but from transport poverty. They are quite often reliant on a private car for their everyday needs. So I think the new European Bauhaus can help bring an integrated approach along the lines of this 15-minute city that Carlos Moreno has said to us. Of course, many of us know what a 15-minute city is. We live it every day, of having the shops that you need, the places that you work, the social spaces that you inhabit available within a walk or a cycle ride away. And I think that will be another positive outcome from the new European Bauhaus. And I spoke about inclusion earlier. We talked a lot about universal design. So I think in designing and retrofitting housing, we need to think about the whole life cycle from childhood to old age. So we need to phase out the reliance on steps in our homes, make sure that kitchens work for people who have disabilities or even dementia, and think about the varying needs of people experiencing homelessness, and prioritize design for life, from youth to old age. And for many designers, this is a big change from what we have. So in conclusion, the new European Bauhaus, is it a brave new dawn for design? I wouldn't say so, but I think it is an opportunity to better integrate what we do with the clients that we are working with, and a better understanding of the differing needs and expectations of people throughout their lives. I think it is positive. I think it will help us in providing housing, in providing for the needs of people experiencing homelessness. And I certainly think it is a real positive and an opportunity to improve the quality of housing that we have, tackle the huge challenge in Europe. And I haven't even mentioned the elephant in the room of the 3 million displaced people from Ukraine who have come into the EU. But I think any crisis has an opportunity there as well. And I think the crises of Russia's war in the Ukraine, the crisis of climate, will allow us to rethink the housing that we provide, to focus on using design to improve the quality of the homes that we provide, and to think again about tackling both housing and the root causes of homelessness in society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kieran, for your interesting and important perspectives. And if I heard right, there was even a certain hint of optimism on the decision making on the European level. I know that you have a busy day at the European Parliament, so we hope that you make good decisions there.
Thank you
very much once more. But it's time to move on to our actual presentations. Actually now 2 traditional special practices to interdisciplinary daring delivery. That was complicated. I hope our presenters could catch it. First we have a presentation from Dr. PhD Daniel Talesnik. He's an architect specializing in modern and contemporary architecture and urbanism, and he's also the curator of the Who's Next? Homelessness, Architecture and Cities exhibition at Architekturmuseum in München. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and I want to thank FENSA for this invitation. It's extremely interesting for me and for us as a museum that we're invited to share ideas at a more political level, if you will. And that was our hope when we started thinking about this exhibition. And we've seen that slowly the attention is coming to us. And I say this with a humble tone. I'm not bragging about it, but it's interesting because we are an architecture museum, and as we will see, homelessness is not necessarily an architectural problem, but as Kieran has pointed out, we as a profession and the expanded discipline that includes urban planners, landscape designers, and so on and so forth, can have a lot to say when we're called to the fore. What I'm going to present to you is material from the exhibition Who's Next? Obdachlosigkeit, Architektur und die Stadt, Homelessness, Architecture and Cities, which we presented in Munich between November 2021 and February 2022, and that will go to the Museum for Kunst und Gewerbe in Hamburg in October 2022. This is our museum here in Munich, and we have 3 rooms in a museum that we share with 3 other institutions: contemporary art, design, and photography. We depend from the Technical University of Munich, but have our rooms in this public museum. And I will walk you through the exhibition briefly and tell you a little bit about how we tackled the problem. This is the entrance of the museum, and what you see is a big model of a building in Los Angeles, California, Star Apartments by Michael Maltz and Architects, which is perhaps one of the emblematic buildings that address issues of homelessness, of integration, and that actually embodies several of the goals of the European Bauhaus. It's enriching because design is definitely part of it. We could discuss the sustainability, and it's definitely inclusive. It houses people that were homeless in the neighborhood. And this is something that has been emphasized a lot by the Skid Row Housing Trust, which is the client, which brings me to the idea that we shouldn't only understand who designs the architecture, but also who commissions it and who pays for it. And when we start to see the expanded reality of buildings, we can also understand how to become more influential as architects. To the left of my screen, we have one of 13 advertisement columns, what we call in Germany Litfaßsäule, what in France are called Colonne Maurice. And we use them in the exhibition as a medium to present part of our information and as street elements that came into the museum and turned the exhibition space into something that had to do with the reality that happens on the street. I'm going to tell you briefly about the curatorial statement of this. What we see in the background is an image of San Francisco at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's the first sanctioned encampment by the city. And what we see in the background is the city hall of San Francisco. The idea basically is that the city drew these squares on the street and invited people with their private tents to come, and they would help them be able to keep social distance, to quarantine during the pandemic. And that was one of our questions. How can you even keep a social distance when you don't have a house? How can you be asked to quarantine in a city? Briefly, there are 3 things that we addressed in the exhibition. There was an urgency coming from the coronavirus pandemic. Homelessness became more visible in cities around the world, and we started seeing how different administrations reacted to the crisis. We do understand that there's been a discourse or a speech coming from politics over the last years in certain countries that addressed poverty at large as something having more to do with an individual fault, that it was something more or less related because you as an individual hadn't tried hard enough. And we wanted to shift that discourse completely to the idea that an issue like homelessness is a systemic fault, it's a systemic issue, and that we either collaborate together as societies to address it, or we're going to get nowhere with it. We also understood from the very beginning that although it is a global problem, it is always a local reality. So things that you can learn in one city don't necessarily become things that you can adapt one-to-one to another one. So this idea of global crisis, local reality was very present. Then what I said before, that architecture alone cannot solve homelessness, and that it needs to collaborate with other disciplines and to become an actor in broader teams and to understand society at large, sociology, public health, anthropology, urban planning, so on and so forth. And our approach before getting to architectural examples was to understand this local reality in 8 cities around the world, cities that are not in Europe, because one of our arguments was that countries from the EU to a larger or lesser scale, have still welfare states. And what we see in countries that don't have such strong welfare systems is that the crisis is even more out of control. And by this, I'm not saying that Germany is in such a good place with a topic like homelessness. All the contrary, the numbers are extremely worrying. But when you see the reality in certain cities in the United States, for instance, you realize that the welfare state should not only be defended, but be made more robust. The cities were Los Angeles, San Francisco, Moscow, Shanghai, Mumbai, Tokyo, New York, and Sao Paulo, 8 cities around the world. We worked with local researchers. We asked them several questions and they gave us back data, information, which we processed. And we expanded the topic not only to usual statistics, how many people in a city experience homelessness or how many people are below the poverty line, but we wanted to understand the real estate market, land value, who owns the land, what's the average price of rent, what's the average price of land, so on and so forth. Then we had a room with 19 housing case studies. Interestingly, none of them were housing first because we could not find examples that were specifically designed as housing first that also brought to the table issues of perhaps aesthetics that we were also interested in. These case studies were from all over the world, not only the cities that we studied in the first room. Most of them in our selection were from Los Angeles, actually. And we chose by a criteria of high standards. We didn't want representation from as many countries as possible. I'm going to show a project by Alex Hagner, who will present later, Vinci-Rast in Vienna, which is, it embodies so many of the things that Kieran said. It is a refurbished building. So there's the idea of reuse and recycling an old building, sustainable materials. And there's also in this case an invention because it houses students with people that had previously experienced homelessness. And there is a business in the ground floor, a cafe that also provides work for some of the people that live in the building, collective spaces in the rooftop and in a garden. And the idea that there's privacy in rooms, in units by 3 people that share bathrooms and kitchens, but also opportunities to share with the larger community that lives in the building. We had everything from shelters to buildings like this one in the exhibition. And we provided, as I said before, quantitative information, but there's also a description by us, qualitative information that highlights why the building is interesting and why we think it's an example. We did models for each of the 19 units. And in some cases, we also did a large model. And one of these cases is Vinci-Rast. In the third room of the exhibition, we studied German cities, 10 of them, to understand how this crisis and how the reality of homelessness is lived here in Germany. We had a library with expanded material, so people that visited the exhibition could learn more. We commissioned 3 original films, one in Hong Kong, one in Sao Paulo, and one in Munich, to understand local realities. We had also films that we borrowed from other institutions, like an extremely interesting film where Alexander Hagner is interviewed too, called What It Takes to Make a Home, that I encourage you to see, from the CCA in Montreal. And we did a map of Munich with institutions, mapping institutions that work and help people experiencing homelessness, but also highlighting other things in the city that service everybody in society. Public bathrooms, for example. I invite you to see our webpage. You will find all of the information of the exhibition there. The films are there too. And we have a catalog published by Architangle, where you see in the people that we invited to write this idea that it has to be interdisciplinary. There are essays by people like David Madden, who's an economist running the cities program in London School of Economics, sociologists, geographers like Stephen Probinski and Dot Mitchell working in Norway, Louisa Schneider from the Max Planck Institute, an anthropologist working in Leipzig doing field work, Juliane Bischoff from the NS Dockwood Centrum here in Munich, an art historian, and so on and so forth. There are architects, but there's also people from other disciplines because we wanted to take as many points of view as we possibly could. And finally, open the invitation for as many of you as possible to see our exhibition when it opens again in Hamburg in October. Hopefully in the Q&A later, I can address how to shape cross-sectoral cooperation from traditional spatial practices to interdisciplinary daring delivery. Just to say, to finish, that many of the case studies are not only housing, but mix other services that are crucial to reintegrate people into a housing reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, very much. It was very refreshing to hear an architect speak about homelessness as a systemic problem, a systemic issue, and the need for cross-sectoral cooperation. And the exhibition looks amazingly interesting, so have to book a trip to Hamburg in October. But we have also another presentation before we have some time for Q&A. So next we have Aurélie de Smet, researcher at the University of Leuven, Faculty of Architecture. Aurélie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. So thank you for the introduction. I'm really happy to be able to briefly present my own and our research group's work here, which is the Altering Practices for Urban Inclusion Research Group, led by Professor Burak Pak, who I'm also representing here today. So I made a more conceptual reflection, I think, centered around three notions, which we think are very central for altering the current practices. So these notions are daring, cooperating, and altering, and they were already mentioned by others in the previous talks. So let's look at the first one. One thing that we've realized over the past few years is that today we're living in increasingly complex and insecure times. So with the rising ecological and economical challenges, we now see that social inequalities have also been rising. And while it has been going on for a while, recently, as mentioned also in the previous talk, the COVID-19 pandemic confronted us all with this in a very much more tangible way. So during the lockdowns, the only ones on the streets were those who had literally no home to go to. They were suddenly so much more visible. And in this context, also spatial professionals are indeed more and more realizing that to face today's wicked problems, which are combined technical and social, business as usual is no longer enough, but that we have to find and develop new and daring approaches. Transition design is an example of such an innovative approach, which has been forwarded by the Carnegie Mellon School of Design. Transition design explores the role of design in negotiating between the transitions our society is currently undergoing and the ones that it needs to make. In the context of transition design, visioning and futuring are forwarded as activities that allow participants to suspend their disbelief and forget how things are now, to wonder about how things could be. According to Irwin and others, transition design can be used to envision radically new ideas for the future that serve to inform even small and modest solutions in the present. As such, transition design is taking time and transitions into consideration and allowing us to design with time in mind. As an example of an experiment which had such a practice, I would like to briefly say a few words about one of our research group's projects, which is the Solidary Mobile Housing Project. The SMH project is aimed at developing, testing, and refining a model and a prototype for the co-creation of solidary living in mobile and modular homes with and for homeless people. The project was started up with the support of the Brussels Capital Region through their Co-Create research program. In the context of this project, over the last few years, the future inhabitants, which are 8 houseless people from the Brussels Capital Region, have been working together with employees from the non-profit organizations Samen Levensopbouw Brussels and CAW Brussels, as well as with students, teachers, and researchers from the KU Leuven Faculty of Architecture and several governmental and professional actors from the region. Together, they co-developed a housing co-creation method and an architectural construction system designed to allow the rapid realization of affordable housing on temporary vacant lots. As the context and the condition of these places can differ from site to site, And as users' housing needs can vary over time, the co-designed housing system consists of modular elements and interchangeable facade and inner wall panels. As such, the system allows the co-creation of a wide variety of open plans. Currently, a first SMH prototype is under construction on an urban waiting space in the Brussels municipality of Jette. To promote solidarity at different scales, this project will also include in and outdoor collective spaces, which are aimed at enabling meaningful interactions amongst the participants, as well as with the surrounding neighborhood. So with this SMH project, the Altering Practices for Urban Inclusion Research Group aims at exploring if and how, through solidary appropriation of urban waiting spaces for housing, spatial developments in the Brussels capital region can be made more resilient, and democracy in the housing sector can be improved. By demonstrating in practice that an alternative is possible, the SMH project allows to counter the prevailing "there is no alternative" discourse. As such, this project illustrates how prefigurative practices can allow designers to become agents of change. However, as it was said before, and based on our own experiences, we can confirm that we cannot do this alone. As Paida Kaki is suggesting, we need to develop bottom-linked governance structures, which she's defining as creative strategies, which are neither strictly bottom-up nor top-down, but where there's a positive interplay across governance levels between integral, inclusive, and participatory public institutional initiatives from above, and active and empowering involvement from below. Interestingly, this is very much in line with the double-pronged strategy forwarded by Howald et al. In the context of their agency outcome structure model for social change. As depicted in this scheme, this model includes 3 levels and 2 mechanisms for social change: agency and structure. Based on this model, the authors are discerning 3 possible strategies for social innovation. A micro-level agency building strategy on the one hand, which includes tackling the direct symptoms of societal needs and challenges and engaging the beneficiaries in meeting their own needs. And a macro-level strategy on the other hand, which includes tackling the root causes of societal needs and challenges by changing the underlying framework causing the need in the first place. However, in between, they also see a meso-level strategy, which includes connecting agency and structure by focusing on building adequate organizations, networks, and modes of collaboration, and aiming at social innovation through the production of tangible, desirable outcomes. So how to put this into practice, and what's the role of architecture and architects in all this? Here, the notion of altering comes in. This notion is very central in addressing architecture as a critical spatial practice, which is proposed by Rendell and Missen. For Rendell, critical spatial practice involves a move from considering architecture and design as objects in space towards a self-reflective architectural and artistic mode, which is seeking to question and transform the social conditions of the sites into which they intervene, as well as to test the boundaries and procedures of their own disciplines. Moreover, in this context, Missen is suggesting the conscious implementation of zones of conflict and the fostering of micro-political participation in the production of space as means for addressing this. Similarly, Petrescu talks about altering practices, which she's describing as practices that are aiming to go beyond the world as it is and extend towards the world as it can be, from somehow to other how. And other authors like Constanza Schock and Frey are also relating these to the notions of design justice and design as politics. So going back to our example, we can see how in the context of the SMH project, the Solidary Mobile Housing Living Lab was set up as a collective learning environment where everyone was involved as equal. As a result, not only the needs, but also the skills and talents of the end users were taken into account. This involved a rethinking of the notion of empowerment from a single directional power transfer from the powerful to the powerless towards a reciprocal action, enriching all the involved parties. As I was personally involved, I can testify that all the partners engaged in the Solidary Mobile Housing Lab benefited from each other's prior knowledge and experience, transgressed the border of their own discipline, and took on many different roles. And that this project, as a result, led to single, double, and triple loop learning, resulting not only in academic and professional, but also personal growth, as well as in organizational changes within the involved institutions. As a result, we are convinced that besides offering a short-term solution for the rapid realization of more affordable housing, an experiment like the Solidary Mobile Housing Project, after it will have been developed further, can also be a model to help on the long term transform the housing system towards a more inclusive and transitional approach. In conclusion, by getting involved in reflection in action and reflection on action, together with societal actors, we are convinced that architects are able to deliver innovative solutions to homelessness through out-of-the-box architecture ambition. And by capturing the knowledge produced and then disseminating and transferring it, and at the same time also involving our colleagues and students in this, as academics, we are aiming at equipping the practitioners of the future with the necessary skills to face the current and future challenges. So I hope this presentation has given you a brief insight into how, as a research group, we are working to fostering architecture for urban inclusion. And I am convinced that the new European Bauhaus can offer many opportunities to initiate even more experiments with daring new approaches, to foster cooperation over the boundaries of disciplines and sectors, and to support integral, inclusive, and participatory policy making, which can ultimately alter the current frameworks towards more inclusive and resilient approaches. Thank you.
Thank you, Aurélie, very much for your interesting presentation. Now we have some time for questions and answers from our presenters. You can put questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and I think Maria in the office of FEANSA will help me to find out if there are hands up. While waiting for others to raise a question, I have one question in mind, which also relates to the climate question and what Kieran said about the need to use the existing housing stock. And I think that in the homelessness sector, when we are discussing about the systemic change, we also see the need to do something with the existing temporary accommodation in shelters and hostels. So I think that something that has been done in Finland in renovating some of these buildings into supported housing units, that's certainly one also architecturally interesting theme that should be researched more if there are these kind of opportunities which also provides more housing stock to solve homelessness. But I see one hand already, Joachim Breitestein. Joachim, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentations. I would have one question, maybe more technical question about the Solidary Mobile Housing. How was the infrastructure solved? Was it, you showed me there was this technical module, was it independent from municipal infrastructure, or how did you get water and plumbing and electricity and these kind of things to these mobile units? How did you solve this part?
Okay, thank you for your question. Yeah, it was a challenge at first. We thought we need to design the technical modules as independent, collect rainwater, for example, to have water. But then since the project is now going on in the Brussels capital region, which is a very urbanized region, and all the vacant sites that we explored were actually very much connected to the urban network. So what we did was we're already now in the prototype experimenting with alternatives, but for the moment, we're getting water and electricity from the urban network with temporary installations, like on a construction site. And what was very expensive is to evacuate the dirty water. So there, because you have to install all kinds of piping in the ground, and we're not staying for long on terrain. So for that, we are working with an individual filtration system with 3 chambers, where the water afterwards can be infiltrated in the terrain. But for example, that in Brussels is usually not allowed. So there we need to also have discussions with the municipality, with the region, to allow this kind of more innovative techniques to be tested out and maybe also integrated in the future in Brussels.
There's one, thank you, Aurélie, for your answer. And there's one question in the chat from Clotilde about what do you think about the proposal for the development of an EU technical standard for new European Bauhaus housing projects in the form of standards adopted by the European Committee for Standardization to take precedence over national construction standards? Oh, I wouldn't like to answer that question. That's complicated, but maybe our presenters have a more illuminating view on that. Daniel or Aurélie, do you want to take that question?
Maybe I can give a conceptual answer. And it's more like opening the question more, because in what we experienced throughout our project, since we're working with the end users, and these people are now staying in shelters, any situation is better than the situation they have. So there exists this discussion, or arises, because we also wanted to do technical testing of our modules with the federal organism to check out the acoustic performance, the heating, and also even the air tightness performance of our design. And then we wanted to know where we are compared to the standards. But there's this problem, or this issue that's addressed by Turner, who's writing about housing as a verb, as to where standards somehow are limiting our possibilities and actually making the situation for vulnerable people worse, because the standards are so high that it takes so much time and money to realize solutions that it's actually forcing them to live in bad solutions for longer. So with this organism and amongst the project's partners, we have these discussions on which standard to follow. Should we advocate for lower standards for temporary housing, for example, as it is only a transitional period where you'll be living in that? And anyway, it will be better than living on the street. So it is a very ethical discussion that's already going on because of our project. So when I also received this question from in the context of the new European Bauhaus, on the one hand, I think it's very good to have these kind of standards overarching and overruling the local standards. On the other hand, I believe some countries have very high standards, which is also positive because they are improving, as said, the greenhouse emissions and fighting energy poverty and so on and so on. So it will be very hard, I think, to find a balance. So what I think this kind of overarching standards should maybe not be technical standards, not talking about numbers of heating and acoustic performance, but I think more social and general performance standards about how people live and who has access to housing, who participates in constructing housing. I think that's very hard also, but it's a conceptual approach rather than a technical and numerical approach.
Okay, thank you, Aurélie. I have to admit that for me, this all kind of temporary solutions and mobile solutions out of the box are a little bit problematic in some ethical sense, because I think that I have only one criteria for architectural design concerning solutions to homelessness is that the housing solutions should be such that they are for every man. So if a mobile solution is for whoever could live there, that's okay. But I have some suspicion about the solutions that are specially meant only for homeless people. This is a I think this is a long and ongoing discussion, but I think that it's very important also for architects to think about what kind of transitional or temporary solutions we are creating when we should aim to provide permanent housing to end homelessness. But there was also one.
Can I say one thing about?
Yes.
Sorry, I
yes,
really want to reply to that because as an architect and urban planner, this is very much also a concern we had. But then when we started this project with the social organizations, who are actually the ones who asked to start up this project because they did temporary appropriation of buildings and noticed that any investment of temporary housing to like this need is so high in Brussels that they lost this investment. So they wanted to have a mobile solution to take the houses with them from one side to the other. And then as a faculty of architecture, what we brought in is this co-creation and taking the end users along. We see that the housing doesn't become a house as I wrote, a commodity or an item, but it becomes a tool in empowering these people. And the transitional situation allows them to be part of a project, have a saying on how they want to live, be heard, but also share. One of them was a carpenter and is a carpenter again. Yeah. He knows more about wood than the architect, so he feels really proud. And when you hear these people, so the housing becomes a tool, and through the empowerment, they become more stronger to be able to take their life back in their hands, and not only the housing situation. And then the housing also follows, of course. So temporary, yes and no, as an experiment, as a tool, I believe in it.
Yeah, I think you described very, very well this co-creation process, and that was most interesting. There was also one comment for you on the chat. Thanks, Aurelie, for your presentation. I wonder why you have not mentioned the issue of mental health and the role of the body as the baseline of the design process to accommodate really transformative solutions for people who sleep, in parentheses, not just live in the street. They do not have intimacy. They don't own their body's sphere. So that was more a comment for you. Was there something that, Daniel, you wanted to add? You said something about this intersectional the collaboration between different sectors.
Right. Well, I think the interdisciplinary comes to the fore not only in trying to analyze the problem, but actually in the design process. And we saw that being present in so many of the case studies that we exhibited in the exhibition. So I think this idea that it's only housing is also up for discussion when it comes to reintegrating people into a housing reality, if you will. And something that has been commented also in relationship to the approach that we took in the exhibition is that we showed so many case studies because we didn't think that there was one that could be either replicated all over the world, or that it was like, oh, this brings to the fore all of the quote unquote solutions. Let's learn only from this one. By showing so many case studies, we were also addressing the thing, the issue that it's very difficult to tackle the problem from a generic solution or from, and when you see the people that are housed in these projects, there is also in a way a differentiation. Some projects are open to everybody in society. Some of them are dealing with people that have suffered addictions. Some projects are not caring about issues of addiction, but welcoming everybody, and that brings a whole different set of rules, so on and so forth. So the interdisciplinary comes to the fore there, to having social services within buildings, we saw was something extremely relevant and interesting, particularly in big buildings that we studied.
Yes, okay, thank you. There was one question from Ruth Owen for both of you. For outsiders, the line between theory and practice in architecture is sometimes rather blurred. This is especially true when we are discussing at the European level. How can architects and homeless organizations work together to use the New European Bauhaus to deliver concrete impact on ground for homeless and poorly housed people? Just a small question for you, both of you.
Very naive answer, but I think that if there are incentives and there is subsidies and there is money, architects will go.
Yeah. That's a good point. Ruth, you want to say something?
Actually, I was just applauding the very simple answer.
Okay. Yes, I missed. So we still have a few minutes, but if we don't have any more questions, I think that we can move on in the program. Next we have a video presentation from one project called The Block, which was created by Block Architects already in 2016 with the goal of setting a new precedent in housing solutions for people experiencing homelessness in USA. So it's a American project, and due to time difference, they have shared a video presentation with us instead. And this video, around 5 minutes, is about the project's progress, and with the help of the Office of FEANZA, we hope to see the video soon. Then we will move to another presentations. But let's have a look at the video now.
I hope and wish no one had to experience homelessness. But, you know, it taught me a lot about myself. It's like, you know, I was that guy who was, well, what's wrong with those people? Oh, those people, them people, da, da, da. I was that guy. Then the most wonderful thing happened. God, in his infinite wisdom, decided that, boom, I should be homeless. And it changed my entire perspective on what homelessness is.
I've had enough people looking down their nose at me. You know, I don't need that. Because people don't really understand what homeless means. That means a lot of different things. A lot.
When the Block Project was born, a simple solution became possible. Yes, in my backyard, ends homelessness and gives someone a fresh start. This model has empowered homeowners across Seattle to address the rising affordability crisis and end homelessness for an individual by simply opening their land to a new neighbor. The idea was radical. Build beautiful homes using sustainable materials with caring community members while providing a network of support for residents, including social case management services. This idea would introduce a new option to our neighbors exiting homelessness, who are needing a supportive place to land and start anew. Since its founding, the Block Project has been made real over and over again across Seattle neighborhoods. First in Beacon Hill, then Greenwood, Crown Hill, Rainier View, Lake City, Finney Ridge, Rainier Valley, Central District, and more on the way this year in Ballard, Magnolia, West Seattle, and beyond. The Block Project is a unique and integrated approach to addressing homelessness. One connection, one relationship, and one heart at a time. Facing homelessness has always known Seattle isn't lacking in compassion, just direction. That's why we built the Block Shop. The COVID-19 pandemic forced change upon us all, and we emerged with a production facility for the future. Every single component of the Block homes are prefabricated and built here by volunteers, using a design and jig system that is both safe and accessible. These advancements in prefabrication gives anyone the tools to become a home builder. Components are pre-cut to fit precisely in jigs, and manuals give step-by-step instructions with zero room for error. Together, these prefabricated components comprise the entire structure of the home. Building takes great care, attention to detail, and an awareness of others, which happens to be what ending homelessness will require from each and every one of us. This volunteer-powered approach creates pathways for everyone to be a part of this solution. And it's empowering for volunteers to build something beautiful with community that has a purpose. These homes cost a fraction of alternative models and can take less than 6 months between someone saying yes in my backyard and a new resident being welcomed home. The components are delivered to the site, where they are assembled into a home with nothing more than a mallet, Allen wrench, and impact driver. Each home is outfitted with a kitchenette, toilet, shower, and bed. It's a small space, but every detail has been thoughtfully considered. Every material has been vetted to ensure that we're not only building healthy homes for residents, but simultaneously stewarding land, water, and air quality for generations to come through the Living Building Challenge. When we look at the far-reaching impact of our material choices, we see how environmental justice and social justice go hand in hand. This aspect allows for our amazing volunteer community to learn and experience what sustainable building is all about. For some residents, this space might be a temporary landing pad to get a fresh start. For others, they'll call this home for life. Regardless of how long they stay, residents have the support of a case manager, friendship through our companionship program, a dedicated staff, and you, the community backing this project. We need every solution out there to take on homelessness, but for our organization, the responsibility lies within all of us to dig deep, look into our own hearts, and ask, what allows me to stay removed from this issue, and what do I have to gain by coming closer? The truth is, we all need each other, and that we can take on the impossible when we work together. Join this effort. Together, we can end homelessness.
I would like to say to everyone who helped build this house, thank you. You guys rock. Thank you so very much from the very bottom of my heart. I cannot begin to tell you how much I appreciate. I just don't have the words to thank you enough.
Okay, thank you. I think that this block project was one of the projects presented in the 50 housing solutions, out of the box housing solutions, the book produced by the Housing Solutions platform. Clotilde confirms that I was right. It would be extremely interesting to read about some follow-up studies of this project and the experience of the tenants and also the other people living on the same site. But I have not seen that kind of yet. Do you have any comments on this, or shall we move on?
So I'm sorry, so we invited Facing Homelessness to present the project, but they're based in Seattle, so there was absolutely no way to find a common time for the meeting. So that's why they sent the video, but it's a good idea to follow up with them. I will try to see what's possible. Thank you.
Yes, I understand that they couldn't take part of because of the timeline, but of course that depends on how flexible you are. There was one event I took part in Canada that was in my time 2:30 in the night, so it happens. But I think we can move on now to other presentations that we have. The next one we have comes from Pablo Garcia Astrain, who is the Director of Housing and Architecture at the Department of Housing in Basque Country. And he will present the project. I'm not trying to say the name of the project in the original language, but it's about repurposing unused non-residential land in the Basque Country. Pablo, the screen is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I will present our alojamientos dotacionales, maybe in a much more classical way and not maybe not out of the box enough for this forum. We'll see. So I try to share a presentation. So it works. It works by the end. Now you can see it.
Not yet. Let's hope it comes.
Yeah. Now.
Okay. Now we see it. Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna put it in. How this works in. Okay. So, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Housing Solutions platform for the invitation to speak here today about just a little part of our housing policy in the Basque Country, but I think an important one. It works very well. Sorry, it worked before. No. So you see it. The Basque Country is an autonomous region within Spain with 2 million inhabitants, and its statute of autonomy since 1979 provides one of the highest degrees of regional autonomy that exists in Europe, if not the most. Among the exclusive jurisdiction of the autonomous government of the Basque Country, the Basque government has its own housing policy. The Basque Country differs from the rest of Spain, among other things, in that it has been developing a powerful housing policy for 4 decades now, and has one of the highest ratios of protected or social housing in Spain, and the highest ratio of public or social rental housing. Yeah. So what we call alojamiento dotacional. One of the figures recognized by the Land and Urban Development Law of the Basque Country from 2006 first, and then the Basque Housing Law from 2015, is a figure of dotational accommodation, alojamiento dotacional. Maybe the translation is not the good one, but it's the best that I found. The accommodations are, as the name indicates, an endowment, an equipment. They are not strictly a dwelling or a house. They are built on dotational or equipment land, not on residential land, many times on land considered for equipment, to which finally the council or the city council does not find a viable purpose. This makes a residential accommodation as a wildcard figure, which is used to make advantage of undeveloped land, or, as we will see later, to reconvert or transform public buildings. So here you have the clues. This facility are made of apartments of around 45 square meters with a single and unique living space with kitchen and bedroom, and they can also have a separate bedroom and a maximum of 2 bedrooms, but generally we try to fit programs with just 1 bedroom. They may also have common areas with shared services, although this is not this is not very common. So being public facilities, these buildings must be near zero energy building according to our technical regulation. It's much more than a normal housing intervention. The dotational accommodations are rented for a maximum period of 5 years, non-renewable. So they are also rotational, or so this make this typology an ideal formula to be like a first home or contribute to the emancipation of youth. We must know that one of our biggest problem in the Basque Country, the emancipation of the access to the first house for young people. Okay. This is a problem because of the precariousness, low wages, and high housing prices, who plays a very important role in this problem. Housing youth has become a real priority of the whole policies of the government. This kind of accommodation, alojamiento dotacional in its different forms, has been highlighted as one of the innovative 15 innovative solutions by Housing Europe, as I saw it before. So I would like to thank also Housing Europe and the Housing Solutions platform. Currently, we are managing more than 2,000 accommodations in different stages of development, to which will be 8 some municipal ones in the capitals, especially in Bilbao and San Sebastian. I will show you different kind of interventions. The ideal size of a dotational accommodation ranges between 30 and 18 accommodation. However, we have also promotions or buildings around just 10 accommodation and some with more than 100. As you can see in the images, the activity is varied within a limit. We must point out 2 promotions that we subject that were the subject of much more open competition with juries and prizes and all of this. This is the first I said with 10 accommodations. But for example, this one in Bilbao, Zorrozaurre, just by the river in Bilbao, was 16 accommodations. And we have also this one, 120 intergenerational dotational accommodations in Ribera de Loyola in San Sebastian, which is being the subject of a strong controversy at the municipal level, local level, and in a kind of usual not in my backyard attitude from neighborhoods. The idea of the intergenerational dotational accommodation is that these modern apartments with good accessibility and inclusive design conditions can be awarded to older people if the older people who usually have a home on their own, but their own home in the government's empty housing mobilizations program for young people. So it's a kind of exchange. We also develop a prototype for the industrialized construction of this residential accommodation, among other things that has helped us to set the program as the ideal and optimized typology of dotational accommodation, with a single living and dining kitchen room, a unique open space, and a separated bedroom, a bathroom, an outdoor space, cross ventilation, and no more than 35 square meters. Okay. Also, one of the lines of work that we have also recently open is to rehabilitate, to refurbish existing buildings and convert them into residential accommodation buildings. Sometimes even buildings with historical, cultural, and heritage values. This way allows not consuming land, guarantees a good insertion of the facility in the urban environment, which is generally a consolidated one. And it also allows disposing of unusual buildings with no clear destiny or use by local administrations, when they do not have the means to give a dotational use or a municipal equipment, local equipment, and maintain its management over the time. Thus, we currently have 3 interventions, promotions, 12 accommodations in the old house of Arrasate, sorry, 19 in the old courts of Eibar that you see in screen, and 48 in a convent called Las Esclavas in Azpeitia, in the inner center of the Basque Country, which is currently under construction. This is Arrasate. So it's a refurbished operation. And now I have a little video, if we can see it. Maybe it doesn't work. I don't know. Of Las Esclavas. Doesn't work. No, okay. Cannot manage very well my Zoom connection. Sorry for that. So I would like also to talk about what we have called Love Study House program. So what does a Love Study House program looks for? Since big state bubble and in the crisis, and so 15 years ago, in the view of housing shortage, private initiatives have proliferated to convert empty or disused ground floor commercial premises into homes. Thus, some city councils have tried to regulate this situation in a generic way, some seeking to repress these actions, others to promote them, and others more by modulating the situation and sitting from planning where they can be carried out and where not, depending on the urban context. But the truth is that the rental crisis has rendered obsolete many of the endowments of commercial premises provided for by planning and buildings, causing a proliferation of inert and deathly streets. At the department, we carried out a study on the government's public park, and around 100 empty commercial premises were detected. Processing this data with municipal regulations, we conclude that up to 40 homes could be obtained in approximately 20 interventions. Okay. Aware that a house on the ground floor can be a very different and sometimes even problematic situation, we began a reflection on how to address the issue of converting commercial premises into social housing. Also convinced that this operation can also be opportunities for the revitalization of public space and a sort of urban micro regeneration. We decided to carry out a pilot experience and develop an intervention guide for other interventions or occasions. The work of the pilot project had just been finished now, and the first apartments will be attributed in a shortly now in the next months. It is about 3 houses in 3 locations related to each other by a kind of inert public space in a neighborhood with a lot of protected housing in Bilbao, and it would be attributed to a collective, or we call this tercer sector, an association like an ONG, who try to reintegrate young people, minor people that has just become adults, but they have no, how to say, they still remaining insertion needs. So this is the location of the three houses related by public space. The guide also is a work in parallel between the pilot and the guide, and the guide addresses several issues, but fundamentally it focuses on the need to install and rethink the filters between the street and the home, between the public and the private, and also on how architecturally manage the security and the risk of the of intrusion when there is no distance, there is no a high separation or an entry procedure through a common building entry. You know, the generation of intermediate spaces that operate these filters is recommended at the same time that they provide exterior spaces for relief and provide a specific quality to the house, taking it out of the usual standards. You can see in the pictures on the left. The guide was included in the bidding documents for several projects, some of which have been complete. The works have been tendered and awarded and will begin this spring. It is about, like for example, in screen, 6 accommodations in audio, 4 social housing in El Oibar, and 6 accommodation in Vitoria here on the screen. And if you look at it, it's one of the first residential accommodation building, which is in the book of the 15 solutions, but the ground level was not occupied. It was an empty commercial facility for maybe 15 years. It was empty. So we try to optimize all of our resources, and we have launched this project for 6 more accommodations in the same building, and with this reflection of this intermediate space between the privacy and the these are kind of micro housing intervention with no very big influence in the housing policy. However, we believe that it can be serve as a recommendation, guideline, or model for other owners, even private ones. We also wanted to show that architecture can contribute to generate other types of housing and other kinds of situations. For sure, we believe that we find that we can have some more housing in our own public buildings, even if it's not a big change, a big number. There is no reason not to do it, and we must try to do it right and with the best architecture we can provide. Maybe, I don't know, maybe in contrast with the other talks, is a little much more classical way to approach the problem, but is okay, is from public institutions, maybe is not so classical way. Thank you for your time and your attention, and sorry for my English level, which is a little bit lower than expected maybe, and for the Zoom presentation, who didn't run very well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pablo, very much for your presentation, and it was, you were maybe too modest because it was full of interesting examples and a lot of food for thought, and there are some questions that we can certainly address in the Q&A a little bit later. But at this point, I want to thank you for the presentation, and we have still 2 more presentations before we have time for questions and answers. And so I think we move now to the next presentation, which is by Joachim Breitenstein. Joachim is an architect in Finland, co-founder of Kolaplan and Village Co-Living, and he will present a project on co-living and anonymous apartment allocation as a solution to urban inclusion and homelessness. Joachim, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you see my screen share now?
Yes, we see it.
Good. Yes, thank you very much for having me and for the invitation. I actually represent these organizations, and Colaplan is my link to Housing Solutions platform from before. But I also represent Tafka Architects, and like you said, Village Co-Living. Tafka Architects is an architecture office founded in Vienna 15 years ago with a focus on sustainable housing. And currently we have offices in Vienna, Berlin, and Helsinki in Finland. I am responsible for the Helsinki office. And then also the Tafka team has been co-founding Village Co-Living, which is a Finland-based co-living developer. And I will tell more about then these two contexts today, actually, because they relate to the topic more with regards to what we are currently doing. So it was really interesting to see these previous presentations, and looking forward also to the last one to learn about these examples. And now I'm happy to share some of our work and ideas that we are working on how to enable housing for the one most in need. I will start with presenting a principle which we follow in most of our work quite a lot. It originates in Vienna, the so-called Vienna 4 columns model of housing development, and both with the work we do in Tafka Architects and also the work we do in Village Co-Living is very much inspired by this, and we implement these principles. The goal for this is to reach a holistic sustainability, and the way it works is that there are a list of social, ecological, economical, and architectural quality criteria. I think in Vienna it's, maybe Alex can correct me on this, but I think it's 100 or a bit more than 100 more or less standardized quality criteria that to address these 4 columns of sustainability. And then there are standardized assessment methods for each of these criteria. Either it's a metric or then it's a expert evaluation that then eventually results in the score for any project that is evaluated. And the goal with this is to make sure that all projects are genuinely holistically sustainable, and only those who reach the level on all of these in a balanced way are then passed and get built. So we use this principle when we plan and develop, for instance, these Village Co-Living projects. I have here now three ideas, so to speak. One of them is already completed. One is in planning and development phase, and the other one is an initiative. And the first one is Tafka Architects project from Vienna called 4+. It's a housing first project where a part of the apartments in the project are allocated for the homeless in an anonymous way. And the idea with the anonymity is that it's socially equal. No one knows which apartment is for the homeless or not. So the idea may be a bit what Juha mentioned, that there is no line between how homeless or a non-homeless person lives. This project was enabled by publicly funded subsidies, and it's completed in Seestadt, Aspern in Vienna with a variety of partners. Then I go to the right column here before going into the one that I will dig in more in detail. But we have an initiative to house refugees with the help of co-living and communality. And actually, this is something I'm very much look forward to Alex's presentation to hear how Vintirast, I think you are doing this already. So I look forward to hear that. But we have a similar idea in the Village Co-Living context, where we actually already have a lot of applicants who already live in co-living situations in apartments. And then we have an increasing demand for refugee housing also in Finland in the coming near future. And the idea would be to set up communities where where locals live together with refugees in order not only to provide a housing but also a safe community to support the integration. So, but yeah, I think maybe I leave it there, and maybe Alex can touch it, or then I can read in on your projects more. And we are working together with that now on these different actors in this field. But now I will present a bit more village co-living and how we aim to implement this anonymous apartment allocation also in projects that could be independent from publicly funded subsidies. So it could be for homeless or any other vulnerable group that needs help. Village co-living, the background for our concept is in a larger scale in urbanization and all its outcomes in various ways. But the way it is, for instance, visible in Finland is like this. So this is a graph of the rents and the consumer prices in Finland for the past 10 years, and both of them are increasing. But since 10 years, the rents have taken a steep deviation from other consumer prices, so which results in that housing is ever more expensive in relation to everything else, which is a problem we try to address. Another thing is that in Finland there is a constant increase of people living alone. So in all age groups. This is something that we think it gives reason to increasingly also provide solutions to cater those who live alone and who also would perhaps not want to live alone. This is a take on our residents and tenants, and they live in these co-living communities, and there are some of their testimonials why they do it. I think the way it's most easily summarized is that every one of our tenants needs affordable housing, and everyone gets some very concrete benefit from living in a community. But that concrete benefit can be a range of things, and also there is not any very clear demographic with age or social group or anything like this that would define our target users. It's a very diverse group who for some reason gets benefit from living in a community. So based on this, we have then written our constitution, and this formulates basically why we do the things we do and how we do it, basically what I explained previously. So we want to enable for the resident participation in planning. This is us planning together with the community in one of the projects in Helsinki. So not only to plan the space and the building, but also to participate in community formation and setting up the community decision making. And then with regards to the physical space, we want to offer a high quality, affordable home. It means then a private space for this household, can be anything from 1 to several rooms, and then try to use the high quality shared spaces. And on top of that, the community, where the communality is supported, but not forced in any way. Currently, we have 2 ongoing developments in the greater Helsinki area, one closer to the city center and one in Vantaa municipality, just north of Helsinki. The idea I would want to here present and maybe discuss also a bit then what we try to implement in our developments. Together we have a potential investor on board who would also be interested in pursuing this kind of more social agenda. And the idea is here that we would, in a bit similar way than the Housing First projects in many places, allocate a certain amount of units to lower rent units that would then within the project be partly financed by the higher rent units. So within one project, we would want to create this kind of economy where the part who pays higher rent and are representing a different user group, but still have in common the communal life and the need for the housing, would help in finance through their a bit higher rents would help finance lower rents that would be enabled for these vulnerable groups, such as homeless or other special groups like this. So currently it looks like this can be possible. Traditionally in Finland, this is usually done on a block level. So one building might be social housing, one building might be free finance commercial housing, and some in between models there. But in Village Colony, we are now evaluating our hypothesis on could this be done independently from public subsidies and within one project. And so far it looks possible, and the completion for these projects we are now developing is estimated to be within a few years, the first one. So then we will only see how it turns out. But this is what we're currently working on, and I wanted to present as an idea here to get some feedback maybe. And yeah, this was our presentation. And yeah, thank you on behalf of all of these organizations. Thank you for having us, and looking forward to hear the final presentation and discuss more then.
Thank you, Joachim. Thank you, Joachim, for interesting presentation. There are already a lot of questions on the on the chat, but I think that we still want to listen to the last presentation, which is from Alexander Hagner. He's an architect, and he will present a project that brings together students and formerly homeless people in community living in Vienna. Alexander, it's your turn now.
Yeah, thank you, and hello all together. Trying to share my presentation. Do you see anything?
Yes, we see the slide of this event at the moment.
So let's start. Yeah, I'm together with Ulrike Schadner. We founded an office in Vienna called Gaupenraub. We are small. We are doing any kind of architectural projects. But what we have beside is these situations in our neighborhood. This is Vienna 2, the so famous Vienna, famous for its social housing policies. But we do have it, and we question ourselves about 20 years ago, why does it look at some places in Vienna like you can see it here? And we think it's not a question of quantity of offers people who live in the streets have, it's a question of quality. What does the town and the officials offer to people who experience homelessness? And we think with our tools of architecture, maybe we can do, support probably the topic of housing, because informal housing, informal buildings in Europe are impossible. At least if one is doing it like that, it might be okay for the town, for the officials, but if more comes together, they will end the informal housing. Means that it needs professionals, it needs architects to build houses for people who are homeless. And what we figured out is that if we start to do our job connected to homelessness, we need more of all we can and not less, like it was practiced as we saw in all these so-called social projects the last, let's say, 50, 40 years. We think we need more of all we can. So the idea was in 2002 that we might build some kind of small village, like a kind of old people's home for homeless persons. This was an idea coming from Graz in Austria, and we wanted to support it. But we weren't successful for, let's say, 16 years. And this was the first thing we saw, that this idea, not in my backyard, you said already this sentence, it's always about most of people we know, they don't want to accept in their neighborhood a project for homeless. And yeah, we struggled with this problem a lot, often. In these 16 years, we did then alternative things, because there were different opportunities to work as an architect in homelessness. And this is the project I want to show to you. It's in the middle, more or less in the middle of Vienna. It's very close to the center, to the first district. And it's about that this empty building, for years empty building, we conversed into this building. And it's a building students and formerly homeless persons live together and work together. The idea came up by students. They were the initiators, and they found an association called Winzirast, and they found us, and we together, we thought about what this empty house could be connected to the idea of bring up perspectives for homeless persons in the middle of the town. Having made this bad experience with the neighbors, with the other projects, we started in a different way. Our idea was to start a flea market in the empty house before we started anything, to inform the neighbors that there might be a project about homelessness in future. And this was quite a good idea, that by this kind of flea market setting, we could talk to the neighbors from person to person. It was not about a bigger information event. It was a personal information, and this helped so much, so that we really could realize the project during 3 years, from the first idea up to the opening. The project is about common living. We have 3 floors of living in this project, with 3 shared apartments. Mostly 3-person live-in apartment with a small bathroom and a small kitchen. And what was very important, it shows until nowadays that there are single rooms and not double rooms. If we would have done double rooms, maybe there would have been the possibility to bring double as much people, but the idea to have single rooms was very important for the project. We try to see this chance to be in the middle of the town, to bring up spaces which connect the social project to the rest of the town, to its surrounding. And by starting the project, we started also to collect people from the neighborhood, from an emergency shelter of the association, students as well, potentially inhabitants. We collected a lot of people who might be helpful to prepare the building for our needs, for our ideas. For example, only in the restaurant place, we collected about more than 50 people from everywhere in the town to help us to prepare the design, to do the interior architecture. And this was a strategy we still use nowadays too, that we try to involve as much as people possible from the rest of society, let's say. Also kindergartens, for example, especially the young peoples, we address our projects because they are our future. And we are sure that as earlier we involve young people, the better will be the future. This kindergarten, for example, they donated 420 euros to the project they collected in a Christmas market. So we try to open up the architecture for, let's say, disadvantaged groups of society. We want to open it up to all society as soon as possible, not in the moment it starts, of course, then too, but as early as possible to involve, let's say, anybody in the projects. We have in this special project in the basement, we have 3 workshops, sorry. In these workshops, people find things to do. For example, producing these boxes we sell on Easter markets or Christmas markets. For this producing, we serve lunch for people who are working with us, and most of them don't speak that well the German language. So that's why by volunteers there are German courses, and this is the deal. They help us working in the project and get something for it, but not money at first. So we have this restaurant in the basement. This is connecting the project to the surrounding. The restaurant has an outdoor space, which we try to make as nice as possible. What we don't have, for example, this is just the idea that Juha, you said this special architecture for special people, let's say, this is not what we should do, but we figured out that if you have people having made the experience of living in the streets, there are maybe a lot of psychological problems, and we can bring pressure out of architecture, pressure out of houses, if we, for example, don't do things like that, but to put all the access in front or in the yard of the house, to have the staircases there and the ways how you come to your flat. So you have it as balcony as well as a communication space. By having all the access outside, you can communicate between the floors, which you can't in a normal house. So we figured out that by doing these projects, architects have a lot of tool to make a better or a worse architecture for people who might be, a bit, how can I say, who might have problems because they are not as much as accepted as we all in society, for example. We have a rooftop garden there. The idea was that students and formerly homeless could work there together. This kind of togetherness idea we thought might be helpful, that they might come back to normal life, let's say. We have this loft studio close to the garden. We were, as architects, asked whether this might be too luxurious for this project, but we thought we need it. We need this more. If you think about social architecture, it's almost about less and weak and smaller and more narrow, but I think we need to turn this 180 degrees around. We have, by having this loft space, a lot of people coming from outside, renting it, celebrating their birthday there, for example. There are other associations renting the space because it's that nice. So the idea of cross-financing, we didn't have at the beginning, but it shows that this is an idea which we much more should include in so-called social projects. In the very basement, we have a lecture space for different events. In total, this Winzirast mittendrin, we see it as a link between a group on the edge of society, let's say, and the rest of society. We didn't want to build any kind of threshold between what we want to do. So we are talking today about inclusive urban situation, and I think with these projects a lot of people come and visit it, and they were, let's say, proclaiming that they don't see the homeless. Where are they? They want to know where is this social project? They can't find it, and we think this is the right way to do. Meanwhile, we did this idea that having this small village for heavily homeless people for their last period of life, we realized it. We opened 4 years ago now, and this is another project. I think it has complete different aspects because it's for a complete different aim of working with homeless problems. and we made learnings there a lot. We already saw this kind of prefabricated small solutions for people in need. So I started in my professorship with the students to develop a prototype as an emergency home. Doesn't matter whether the emergency is coming because someone needs to leave the Ukraine, for example, and to come, or someone, maybe a climate catastrophe, he or she doesn't have a home anymore, or because of homelessness. We try to figure out what does someone in an emergency situation, what does he or she need, and we developed there a prototype which, let's say, serve two aspects. One aspect is that I need a space to be private, all alone for myself. And on the other side, I need contact to a community, and to have these both completely different possibilities for a person in need. We made two completely different sides of this small house. On the one side, it's more or less closed. That's the one you see. And on the other side, it's completely open to a private outdoor space. We tried to use the outdoor space for the indoor space to make it as large as possible. We are working on that right now. Maybe in 2 months we will finish it and we can present it. And we are right now working on another thing. It's about accommodation and work for people who are homeless. It's about working with plants and working with animals. In the background you see a barn for chicken, for example. And this is our newest project. Both buildings you see had existed already at other places. We how do you say, demontieren. We built it. What's the opposite, Laura? Demontieren, do you know what it is? Okay, the building had been existing in another part of Lower Austria. We took the buildings and brought it to this place, and we constructed both again and made them probably for homeless people to work there and to live there. We had been talking at the beginning about the question of standardization. I think standardization doesn't help in any case, because in the last 20 years we are working on the topic of homelessness. We saw that people out in the street, they are even much more different than we are. We think that we are quite different from the next, but in homelessness there are 360 degrees kinds of people, let's say. For one, housing first might be the totally perfect idea and solution, and for the other one it's completely wrong. We have all these different aspects. So my approach would be, as different as the people are who are homeless, as different the proposals, the architectural projects, the solutions must be, if we really take the idea serious, that we don't want to have homeless people in the streets. We have to do a very large variety of offers, and architecture could help in this target. So thank you, and I have to apologize too for my English. It comes from school time, and this is more than 40 years ago, so sorry for that.
Thank you, Alexander, and no sorry for the language, completely understood. It was very interesting and illustrated some of the points that I had in mind, because I understood now, listening to your presentation, that it's not the question about special housing solutions to homeless people or normal housing solutions for normal ordinary people. It's a question about good architecture or not so good architecture. And I think that this is the point, that if you have good innovative architecture that's designed for homeless people, that can also be tempting for so-called ordinary people. And I had to admit that I was smiling when I saw the slide where you showed the time when you tried to get a construction site for your project, because it was very familiar for us also that sometimes it takes some years before you get the work started. We have now a little bit more time for discussion, and there are a lot of questions already in the chat. There was one from Doris about the definition of young, and then later she corrected it. This is for Pablo. They are in Albania working for housing solutions for young people, and I read the information on the housing solution platform and wanted to ask, what's the difference between the project developed in 2006 with the standard housing policy solutions, except for the temporary stay 5 years? Do the tenants pay rent, or are they exempt, or do they pay a reduced rent? So did you, Pablo, get this question that was addressed to you?
Okay, thanks for the question. Legally and in our rules of the housing policy, young people are those who are less than 36 years old, and in the alojamientos dotacionales, the accommodations, they pay a reduced rent less than 30% of their increases in their gain. I don't know how to say it. About 200 and 250 euros per month, more or less. Normally, the problem with the accommodation is that theoretically, from the beginning, they were destined to young people, but in the truth, I think for more or less 10 years, because of the economic crisis and the emergency of the housing necessities, they were attributed to all the people who needed, even if they were more than 36 years old. Now, from 44 years ago, we restructured this, and we decide to, because as I said before, the emancipation of young people is a very important problem. Now, 14% of the whole housing attributed to in the normal rule of housing policy is for young people, 40%, and even more than this, in some of this kind of accommodation, alojamiento dotacional, it could reach the total 100%. So the whole building could be for young people. That's, for example, the black one I saw in Renteria is just for young people.
Okay. There was also some other questions for you. There was from Clotilde. How is the Loft study house project financed?
It's financed by the common budget of the housing department. It is in it is in the public buildings of the department. So there's you don't have to pay for the locals or the facilities. We have just to pay the project and the works. and so it's paid and financed by the department. And what I will try to explain also is that at the beginning there was no idea on how to say, to attribute these accommodations or these homes to anyone in a specific way. Is the architecture who has been built that show us that maybe it should be carried a bit more. Maybe it should be destined to specific programs of minor, how you say this, young people less than 18 years old who are alone and they don't have a family, and just and so when they reach 18 years old, there are ONGs who care about them, and maybe it's not signed, but we have a conversation with an ONG who will manage the 3 homes, and so it was now is destined to these young people, but it was not previously thought like this.
Okay. And one more, can you explain a bit more the details of the project prototype for industrialized construction?
So the idea is that there are very small apartments, 40-45 square meters. So theoretically is ideal for industrialization, and we have a prototype to a project prototype to the winners of the Young Basque Architects Prize, and they for the moment it's just the project. There's no realization. There's no construction about this. We have localized maybe lands to do it, but it's just like think to be built industrially in wood, in CLT system. But we are for the moment we are just on the prototype, and as I said, it helped us to define the ideal accommodation, the ideal alojamiento in its terms. For the moment,
Yeah.
It's just this.
There's even still one more question to you, then I leave you in peace.
I don't want to monopolize.
Well, does the housing policy say and implement specific projects to eradicate homelessness? I suppose this is for Basque Country. And how did and does the pandemic affect the accommodation of homeless people through the initiatives under the umbrella of the Basque Country housing policy? This is a wider question. If you can shortly say something about this.
We do this kind of policies always with another agent, an ONG. We call it tercer sector, social third sector, which are the organization who are able to care about homeless, because for department, for the institution, it's very hard to deal or to manage with. It is already difficult to manage with normal users of the social housing, even more with homeless. So we always collaborate with another institution, another ONG, but it's usual to.
Yeah. Thank you for all of your answers. And then there's one for Joachim from Root. how affordable are the low-rent apartments compared to minimum income, for example? And could you say a bit more about the cross-subsidization model?
Yes. Thank you for the question. So, thanks to the space concept, which I briefly presented, where we have this optimized ratio between the private square meters and the shared square meters. Also, the higher rent is generally sub-market. According to current cost calculations, around minus 10 to 20% compared to the market average on the same area. And in these projects, we then always have the ability to adjust and also these lower rents. So if there is 1 or 2 low rent units, it could be closer to free. But if there's more, the amount of discount will be less. So and also there is some room for adjustments for the higher rents. But actually, we are just at the moment in the process of finalizing these financial concepts for these first developments. So we don't yet know the final sums that there will be in these projects. But when we talk about this lower rent, it should be very significantly below market. So more than this, only 10 to 20%. And it will then eventually depend on the amount of these lower rent units. So already in these 2 projects, I think we will have a bit different setups. What comes from the context of the location and all of this. So maybe like was discussed here before, the addressing the local need even within one urban area can result in different outcomes of this. But because we are currently in the process of the development, it's still a bit open for how it finally will be. But this is the ballpark, so to speak. And by the end of the year, we plan to have the building permit planning done. So then we will have all of this fixed, and we will know more. So, but this is the direction.
Yeah. I think that it's extremely interesting idea. It's not going to be easy in the Finnish context, but certainly worth trying to build something like that. Then there's one question to Alexander. Who your clients were for these projects, and who would you like to be your future clients?
A little bit. I am the client myself because I'm a member of this association, and I think this is a good position for an architect, not only to be the architect. That's why we were involved very early, let's say at the beginning of the project idea. And this I like very much because I think we have different ideas, different thoughts to how architecture could be developed. A lot of architects, they just receive everything and they only need to shape the space, let's say, and I don't like that. So the clients are private ones. There is no official money in these projects. I'm a bit sad about. This is one thing in the context of European Bauhaus. I would like to have enough money in all these attempts for housing homeless persons, because I believe totally that if this idea that in 2030 Europe should be without homeless, it can't be about shelter. It must be about hope and about future, all the projects. And therefore we need money, as I show with the small boxes underneath the figures, that if you are talking about equality, you need more. I'm convinced that money is enough there in the European Union, but we have to bring it to homeless for sure. Because what Daniel said at the beginning, I did research with the Goethe Institute in Los Angeles on the topic of homelessness too. And what I saw there is that the connection between people who are out in the street and the inhabitants living in direct neighborhood the connections are broken very often. And this is not in Vienna, at least not, and in Germany as well, as far as I know, there are still connections, and we need to work with them as long as people who are out in the street, I look at them as my neighbor. So our clients are associations. I like very much to work for them because there are no standardizations. In the official government homelessness policies for architecture, there are regulamentations, which I think are not helpful at all. So that's why I like to work with associations. They are free to decide whatever they think is necessary to decide in this context. And that's why we did projects for people like students and formerly homeless living together, mixed, with the idea that if they arrived in this community for a few years, they are that sure again that they say after a while, goodbye, I take my flat, I leave you, I'm back again in life. And also for heavily homeless people having been for years out in the street, who are very ill in physical and psychological, well, you know what I mean. And there is not a single idea that they might be able to deliver anything to society. It's just the idea that to give them a home for their last fast period of life, and that's it. And so I think we need these different kinds of offers. And the best up to now is to work with associations. But I have seen it different too, just to have an optimistic view in future. The student town Marburg in Germany, the mayor asked us about support in our knowledge for to build such a Winzidorf, such a village in their town. And this I like very much, that meanwhile mayors and the government of bigger towns have the idea that they need to do something. So I think time changes. Thank you, Daniel, for your exhibition. This helps to change time. And yeah, okay, I think I have answered the question and some messages more.
Thank you very much, Alexander. And it's easy listening to you, it's easy to understand that you have worked on this theme for quite a while. There are so many things that it's easy to agree with you, and also the thing that there really is money on the European level, and that should be directed to solve homelessness and provide hope for people. Thank you very much. And there was still one question to Joachim. It was related to this rent level. How do you allocate the below market rent housing? Who decides? Who will get the,
in the case of this project, independent from public subsidies, which is what is our hypothesis. It's the community, and by entering a village co-living project, the community member agrees to this basic principle of social, ecological, economical, and architectural sustainability, which there is like an overview rule set, so to speak. But then together with the community, we set up the project specific community and community decision making. So based on these holistically sustainable values, then the community will make the decision for who gets these lower rent units, but guided by social principles coming from the sustainability definition.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Joachim. I think that we are reaching the end of our time. We have had a very interesting presentations and good questions, and I think that there's a lot of need to continue discussion on this theme, but at this point I would like to thank our presenters, and then I would forward the word to Clotilde, who on behalf of the Housing Solutions platform will make the conclusions, and hopefully Clotilde, you also end the session. So this will be my thanks for all of you in taking part of this event. Up to you, Clotilde.
Thank you, Johan. So let me thank the speakers, participants, and you as well, Johan, for moderating this event. So I coordinate the Housing Solutions platform, which is this partnership between Fianza, Housing Europe, and Fondation Abbé Pierre. And I'm very excited about this meeting because what we want to do is really to facilitate, to foster cross-sectoral partnership to find a housing solution to homelessness. And I think it was a great meeting. And I just want to really invite you to look up what the Housing Solutions platform is, get in touch with us, connect on Twitter, LinkedIn, or by email. You can register to our newsletter on the website. And if you have ideas on how we could work together, or we could mobilize this network, working with architects as today, NGOs, social housing professional foundation, we really try to be this platform connecting different approaches to address homelessness. So if you have ideas, if you want to, be more active in the network, please do get in touch. Maybe just to finish, we'll advertise 2 events coming up that we organize. 2 of them will take place in June. One is in Helsinki in the framework of the International Social Housing Festival, and the other one will be in Brussels in the framework of the new European Bauhaus Festival. We have applied for an event. We hope it can happen. So if you're interested, if you want to know more about those events, if you want to maybe come and meet us there, please do get in touch. And I think that's it for me. Thank you so much. The meeting will be available online on our website, and we'll get back in touch with all of you by email. Thank you very much for participating. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.